I suppose I'm going to have to teach you a lesson so you can better follow in his footsteps. Nah, I'm just gonna keep beating you with this crowbar.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. And, recently we talked about Robin 750. And basically, my favorite story in there was the Jason Todd story from Judd Winnick and Dustin Wynn. And, of course, I talked about it with Josh here on the channel. And we enjoyed that story so much, we decided we wanted to talk maybe a little bit more about Jason Todd, the redheaded stepchild of the Robins. What's up, Josh?
Not much. Just, enjoying staying at home a lot and doing schoolwork, reading some comics, and ready to talk Jason Todd.
Definitely a good time to catch up on that read pile, or maybe that selection of trades you've been waiting to get into. So Jason Todd is an interesting character. I think when they introduced him, one of the issues is like his backstory was too similar to Dick's, but they kept changing his origin over time to differentiate him, more from Dick Grayson.
It's kind of funny because I get the opposite impression. I get the impression that people liked him at first because he was basically a carbon copy of Grayson, and they just wanted him to be directly replaced. People knew it was time for Grayson to grow up and go on his own, and they were like, "Well, Batman needs a Robin, so we're just gonna make Jason Todd, who's basically Dick Grayson with a different name." His parents had a circus background, not necessarily acrobatic, but he came from the circus as well, and he was basically had the exact same backstory, same personality as Grayson up until Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Yeah, I didn't say that he wasn't popular because of that, but it seemed like DC kind of got attached to it, and they did everything that they could to change the backstory to where his dad ended up being a criminal that worked for Two Face. I believe Two Face killed him, and maybe his mom had died of cancer or something like that. So they went to the lengths to differentiate him from Dick Grayson over time. But after that, like you said, he never really caught on with readers quite like Dick Grayson. I think they were used to that regular sidekick. Jason Todd became more rebellious. His relationship with Bruce is kind of adversarial mostly.
Yeah, he turned into quite the little brat after the Crisis on Infinite Earths changed his origin. He started as kind of as a criminal himself, just kind of wandering the streets of
Stealing
Gotham.
tires and stuff.
Yeah, stealing tires, hitting Batman with a tire iron, and yeah, I think the story was that Two Face killed his dad. His mom was supposedly lost, or he just didn't know where she was, or something, which comes up. That's a titular item of the plot for Death in the Family, which we're going to talk about. But yeah, basically DC just kind of decided he was way too similar to Grayson, and they wanted him to be his own character. Crisis on Infinite Earths gave them a chance to reboot him, and fans did not like him after the reboot. He was an asshole. He was whiny, complained all the time, very hot headed and reckless. A lot of times he would rush into things, and Batman would have to save his ass. And Batman's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm just going in to beat people up because that's what we do." And no.
Yeah, so that kind of leads right into the first big story I think people remember him in is, Death in the Family. Leading up to that, Batman and Robin are trying to stop a pedophile ring, like in a warehouse. They're monitoring the situation. Robin jumps in there, willy-nilly, not thinking, puts everyone in jeopardy. And Batman basically, pulls him off of duty. He's like, you're too emotionally conflicted right now. I can't trust you to do the right thing. And in this, he kind of runs away from home. He goes back to where he grew up, the house he grew up in, and he discovers the woman that he thought was his mother. She wasn't his mother. His father was his father, but he doesn't know who his mom is. And he ends up going on a quest, to find these three women that were in his dad's like Rolodex back when they had those, that started with the letter S, and basically leads right into Death in the Family from Jim Starlin, one of the great cosmic Marvel writers of all time, the creator of Thanos, but certainly a great DC writer in his own right.
Oh yeah, Jim Starlin did a lot for the Batman family in the 1980s. Yeah, he was great. Actually, before Death in the Family, in Batman 425, which Death in the Family starts in 426, you kind of see the tension between Batman and Jason come to a head. I believe the guy they were going after was it was for domestic abuse. Jason has a confrontation with him on a fire escape. By the time that Batman gets there, you don't see what happens. You just know that the guy fell to his death. When Batman gets there, he looks at Jason and says, "Did he slip or was he pushed?" And Jason said, "I don't know. I guess he just fell." You can kind of see the look on Jason's face, very angry, and you're basically led to assume that Jason pushed the guy off the fire escape and killed him. There's a reason why Batman doesn't let emotions get the better of him when he's in the field, and it's because when you're under the influence of emotions like that, you tend to make mistakes. And Jason was making a lot of mistakes at the time, so Batman had to pull him.
Yeah, so there's an interesting story about that. Joker escapes Arkham, but he's out of money, so he needs to sell his last surface to air missile or something like that. He's going to sell it in the Middle East, but also Robin is there looking for his mom. Batman is there looking to get a hold of Joker. So they all end up converging, but Joker escapes. But then he goes to Ethiopia to steal money from I think it's a refugee camp because they had food. He's going to steal the food and sell it on the black market. Well, that just happens to be where the last candidate to be Jason's mother is. So they all end up being in Ethiopia as well. It turns out that Jason's real mother isn't really a good guy. She's become a doctor. She's kind of helping Joker out. And when there's an opportunity, Joker kind of puts him in a terrible situation. There's an opportunity for her to do the right thing. She does not do the right thing. And she actually sides with Joker and basically turns on her son. And it leads to one of the most impactful panels in comic book history. Basically, Jason Todd has been beaten down with a crowbar. He almost saves his mom and himself, but the door is locked. The bomb goes off. And finally, Batman discovers him. And he never really gets over this. He basically blames himself for the death of Jason Todd, and it haunts him for a very long time.
This kind of goes back to Jason's hot-headedness. Jason had the choice to whether he could go rescue his mother by himself, or he could wait and get Batman to come help him. He chose to charge in by himself. And that's what ultimately cost him here, that he didn't tell Bruce what was happening. Him and Batman could go together. They could stake out the place. They could get in there, strategically take Joker down. He rushed in hot-headed. He let his emotions get the better of him, and it ended up getting him beaten with half to death with a crowbar. And then, obviously the Joker betrayed his mother because he's the Joker, and he blew up the warehouse before Batman could get there, to help Jason Todd out.
There's an interesting thing that happens in between Death in the Family #2, and I believe it's Death in the Family #3. At the very end of that comic book, there is a 900 number. It is basically choose your own adventure for DC Comics readers. I believe it's the only time DC Comics ever did this. You dial one number, Jason Todd lives. You dial another number, Jason Todd dies. And it was a very close vote. I believe they had 10,000 votes, and it was 72 in favor of death. And that is the reason that Jason Todd died in that moment.
72 votes was the difference there. It was wild because they had never done anything like that before in comics, and they had never done anything since. And it's really cool to kind of go back and listen to some of the interviews that, Jim Aparo and Jim Starlin and the editorial at DC at the time, especially the editorial of the Batman family titles, has to say about this, because they did not expect readers to kill Jason. They were not necessarily prepared for that to happen. They thought the readers were going to save Jason, and when the calls came in and the votes were tallied up, they're like, man, our readers are savage. They voted to kill this kid.
Well, there's an interesting story. There's the rumor, it's been going on for a long time, that a guy actually set up his phone to keep dialing in the death number, and he did hundreds of votes, and he single-handedly was the reason that he died. It caused outrage. If you hear Frank Miller talk about it, he is not happy about the way that the Robin died there. He felt like it was not well done and completely unnecessary.
Frank Miller the death of Jason Todd is an essential part to his characterization of Batman. We just don't really necessarily know the circumstances of how he died. But in The Dark Knight Returns, that's a big part of that story. That's essentially why Batman retired in his world, because Jason Todd was killed in the line of duty.
After that, there were actually some teases. I believe it was in Hush from Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee, where it was hinted at that Jason Todd was alive. It turns out that was Clayface kind of manipulating Batman's emotions, to try and defeat him.
You saw the effect that this had on Batman play out through every storybook that Batman was involved in. And this plays a big role in Dick Grayson kind of coming back into Bruce's life, because he sees how, Bruce is suffering. And this suffering that he's gone through in losing Jason actually carries over even into the 90s when Tim Drake is introduced. Because Tim sees how unhinged Batman has come. He sees how Batman doesn't really care about himself anymore. He's getting, a lot more wounds in his fights because he's being reckless. Just very interesting that this loss for him, that for Bruce, just took such a toll on him and it carried over for years and years and years. Until he was finally able to not necessarily get over it, but he got Tim as the third Robin, and Grayson came back into his life as Nightwing. So it did take a hell of a toll on him. But I think it's really cool that in Hush, Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee teased Jason Todd with Clayface, which was definitely a holy crap moment for readers. Like that was wild. And I definitely think it was kind of a tease to see how the audience would react to Jason coming back. And then 2 years later, we had Judd Winnick bring him back in Under the Red Hood. Under the Red Hood is one of the best Batman stories of all time. If you've never read it, do yourself a favor and get a copy and spend a day reading it. It's almost flawless.
We do see a more vengeful Jason Todd even than we saw before, and he's hell-bent on destroying Batman. He blames him for everything that ended up happening to him, and you could see how he could come to that effect. But the way they characterize Batman and his struggle when he realizes who is under the Red Hood was just amazingly well done, and it's Judd Winnick, so you would expect the characterization to be perfect.
It shows, again, it kind of comes back to this implosion that happened in Jason's life and Batman's life based around his death. Jason's primary complaint is, I'm going to, destroy Batman because you didn't kill Joker for what he did to me. Jason doesn't know that Bruce actually tried to kill Joker, and then, Batman having healed about all he could from Jason's loss is like, no, you don't understand, you're still letting your emotions guide you. And, Jason is highly vengeful. He's an outlaw at this point, dressed as Red Hood. He's killing criminals and, not approaching them the way that Batman or the Batman family would. And one interesting thing I'd like to throw into this, the animated version of Under the Red Hood, I feel, is the only circumstance ever where an animated adaptation is better than the comic. There's a big fight scene between Batman and Jason that happens in a bathroom where they basically just destroy the bathroom with each other. That really sends home the level of bitterness that exists between Jason and Bruce. Jason is just absolutely irate over the fact that Bruce did not kill Joker for what Joker had done to him and what he put him through, with the crowbar and stuff. So it's a very heartfelt and gut-wrenching story, about Jason, who was resurrected through a Lazarus pit. We all know when that happens, you don't keep your mind's not in one piece on that resurrection. So there's a lot of goofy stuff that happened with Jason and Talia al Ghul. It's kind of weird. But we get this vision into just how much vengeance and darkness is actually in Jason's life. It was magnified by the Lazarus pit, but it's still there. And man, oh man, that is a brutal and heart-wrenching Batman story if you ever get the chance to read it.
After that, that story, Jason Todd, he's now an anti-hero in a well-loved anti-hero. I think in the end, we got the character we needed all along, but he sure did have to go through a lot of events to finally get something, that wasn't Dick Grayson, that was truly different, but that people could actually enjoy, because the whiny, petulant child version wasn't a character that a lot of people could latch onto or really appreciate. But now that we've got the anti-hero, he's got some Bruce in him, but he's definitely not Bruce. Like, he is, as Nightwing is the more healthy version of Batman, Red Hood is the less healthy version of Batman, the one that's on the edge of maybe becoming the Punisher.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. Dick Grayson is the best case scenario of Batman, and Jason Todd is absolutely the worst case scenario of Batman. He is what happens if Batman crosses a line and goes too far. But you are definitely correct. This is the version of him that fans have always wanted. We got a character that's capable of sustaining his own title. He's had his own title in Red Hood and the Outlaws since the New 52 started. He got that through fans saying we want more of him. And one really, probably my favorite character arc of all time for Jason Todd was in Batman Battle for the Cowl, when he claimed ownership of the Cowl and had to fight with, it was Bruce's three boys that it came down to, Tim, Dick, and Jason. Then came down to a match between Jason and Grayson, and Grayson won. But he dressed up as this really dark Batman and was using guns to kill people, and Grayson was mad because you're wearing Bruce's signal, you're wearing the bat on your chest while you're going around shooting and killing people. And he had this sick, twisted idea in his head that he was entitled to the identity of Batman, which is a really cool story. I like how each Grayson and Jason Todd both staked their claim to the Cowl and had to fight it out for that. And then New 52 started a whole new direction for his character with Red Hood and the Outlaws. But yeah, I mean, his character in the 2000s when it underwent drastic transformations, and we ended up with the character we always wanted. So I guess everything kind of turned out all right for Jason.
It did. And Jason Todd fans, I think, have a very interesting story arc. I mean, there's a lot of history there and a lot of twists and turns for the character. Obviously, we talked the most about the two big stories that he's involved in. We've had an excellent conversation about Jason Todd here today. Is there anything else, one last thing you needed to say about the character before we wrap this up?
I think Jason is a really good embodiment of vengeance in the Batman family. His character is just all about vengeance, and it kind of pulls, this vengeance from Batman and his own reasons and motivations to want vengeance. So if you're looking for kind of, the worst case scenario of what Bruce Wayne could have been, and for a character who's just all about vengeance, definitely check out Jason Todd. If you haven't read Under the Red Hood, we're all kind of stuck inside right now. Go pick it up on digital, go order it on Amazon or something, and do yourself a favor and read it in a day. It's a classic Batman story. It's so good.
He's definitely the antithesis of Nightwing Dick Grayson, whereas Nightwing Dick Grayson is the Batman who healed and accepted things, but still wants to help people. Jason Todd is the Batman who never healed and maybe never can, and is driven by vengeance.
He never will heal. He's just permanently broken.
All right. Thanks a lot, Josh. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.